Indirect talks continue between Washington and Tehran despite a 10th day of U.S. strikes. Mediator Pakistan holding talks in Islamabad with Iran's interior minister set to meet the Pakistani prime minister. Explosions reported in 6 Iranian provinces and on Qeshm Island. Iran hitting out at U.S. partners in the Gulf. Warning sirens sounding 4 times in just 24 hours in Bahrain, and Jordan confirming intercept of 5 drones. A coalition led by Saudi Arabia set up in 2015 to counter Houthi control in Yemen, pledging measures to protect commercial vessels in the al-Mandeb Strait after Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen declared a maritime blockade on Saudi shipping, which could include attacks on the al-Mandeb gateway to the Red Sea, through which some 11% of global maritime oil trade passes.
Iran's near-total blockade on the Strait of Hormuz for much of the year pushed Saudi Arabia to divert more than 70% of its normal daily crude exports to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. Data from Kepler and Signal Ocean show shipments from Yanbu averaged 4 million barrels per day in recent weeks. Ships from Yanbu bound for Europe go north through the Suez Canal. Those heading to Asia go south through al-Mandeb. Data show total petroleum volumes transiting al-Mandeb amounted to 7.4 million barrels per day in June, or about 7% of global oil output. It is not clear how the Houthis could impose a blockade on Saudi Arabia. The faction is a military, political, and religious movement fighting a civil war against Yemen's Saudi-backed, internationally recognized government for more than a decade. Beginning in 2023, Houthi forces attacked and even boarded international cargo ships in what they said was solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. The attacks severely disrupted global shipping. A U.S.-led mission to restore free navigation in the Red Sea involved repeated strikes on Houthi targets. Red Sea traffic has not recovered since. Data from the Suez Canal Authority shows traffic through the waterway down at its lowest in at least 50 years. In their statement, the Houthis' armed forces said they were declaring, quote, a maritime embargo against the criminal Saudi enemy, based on the equation of an eye for an eye, effective immediately. They said the embargo was in response to what they called, quote, an unjust and oppressive siege imposed on Yemen by the Saudis. A 2022 ceasefire between the Houthis and the Saudi-backed government had held until last week, when Yemen's internationally recognized government said it had struck Sana'a airport to stop an Iranian plane landing. The Houthis said Saudi Arabia was responsible, and in response fired missiles at Abha airport in the kingdom's mountainous southwest.
And we're joined by AP correspondent Jon Gambrell, reporting with CNA live from Dubai. John, Houthi intentions clear, a blockade in response to a blockade, but it is not clear how, as we just heard, it might actually implement that blockade. But should there be a blockade by the Houthis, could we see an impact as we have seen, or even worse, in the Strait of Hormuz?
That's the main question, because right now, Saudi Arabia, over the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, is actually shipping its oil that it collects in a province near the Persian Gulf, actually down to the southwest to the Red Sea to then export out to Asian clients. Now, should the Houthis, and this is a big if, launch attacks on these tankers coming out, trying to go down south through the Red Sea, through the al-Mandeb Strait, into the Gulf of Aden, and then on to the Arabian Sea, that would be a major impact, because already we're seeing a fifth of all natural gas and oil traded that once passed through the Strait of Hormuz not get through there. So this would be pretty major. Now, this has a couple of ifs on it. And one of the things is whether or not the Houthis are going to be really willing to potentially engage again with airstrikes targeting them. The U.S. did launch that campaign against them during the Israel-Hamas war. That saw pretty extensive damage and a lot of the Houthi leadership killed. But Iran, which is the main benefactor of the Houthis, likely has been pressuring the Houthis to engage in this threat. And if they carry it out, and if they do target these Saudi oil tankers, that could spell big trouble for global energy markets. Already we're seeing benchmark Brent crude traded about $90 a barrel. And in the United States, a gallon of gasoline is up to $4. That's a major, major impact on most people's pocketbooks there. And as it gets closer to a midterm election in the U.S., gas prices are going to be that much more of a political hot potato, meaning that the Houthis really could put the pressure on should they decide to attack.
Or even so, not full-out panic yet on oil prices because there is hope, there's suggestion, and some evidence that talks, meanwhile, are continuing, even if they are continuing on indirect channels.
That's right. We do have the Iranian interior minister in Pakistan today. He's already met with the Pakistani army chief of staff. He has met also with the prime minister there. Now, those are two key mediators that were trusted by the United States to help them reach that initial deal with the Iranians. Now, over the last 10 days, however, that deal has fallen apart over Iranian attacks on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz, using a route that went through Omani territorial waters rather than under Iranian control and Iranian territorial waters. Iran has retaliated over these American airstrikes that hit electrical power stations, allegedly water plants, and other facilities in Iran by attacking the United States Gulf Arab allies. In Kuwait, for instance, there have been repeated attacks on desalination and power plants there. So it's really important what happens. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, the Iranians only sent the interior minister, not a higher ranking official like Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi or the parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf. Both of those men had been key mediators in that initial deal. So it remains unclear just what the Pakistanis are going to be able to do, but many in the Middle East, including Egypt and other nations, have been trying to pressure to try to get a ceasefire in this new hostilities because they fear a return to all-out war in the region.
Thanks. AP correspondent Jon Gambrell covering the story for CNA live from Dubai.